My name is Sanford Rubenstein. I am a civil rights lawyer in New York City who has represented countless victims, injured, and over 20 families who have lost loved ones as a result of excessive force used by police brutality in the city of New York and the New York metropolitan area. I am testifying today about the wrongful death of Shem Walker, who was killed by an undercover New York City Police Department detective in front of his mother's home in Brooklyn, New York. It was a quiet Saturday evening in Brooklyn when Army veteran Shem Walker visited his 75-year-old mother in Clinton Hill, Brooklyn. The 49-year-old father of two routinely checked on her and made sure she was safe and well taken care of at all times. Little did his mother know that this would be the last time her son would walk through her door. Being a former serviceman in the Army, Mr. Walker swore an oath to serve and protect. He undertook this duty not only for his country, but for his community and family as well. He took it upon himself to keep his loved ones secure in their Brooklyn neighborhood that was often riddled with drug trade and would often risk his life just to tell a potentially dangerous individual to leave the premises in front of his mother's home or on the stoop in front of her home. On July 11, 2009, the day was no different, except this time, his encounter with an unknown individual turned out to be an undercover police detective in plain clothes who did not identify himself as a police officer. According to police accounts, the undercover officer who was working in an anti-drug operation was sitting on the stoop of Mr. Walker's building. Another officer, well, that was his mother's building. Another officer in street clothes was outside the building next door at 368 Lafayette Avenue. They were working as ghosts, police parlance for undercover officers whose job is to provide backup for another officer who is doing what they call buy and bust work. In this case, the third officer was in front of a bodega 2 doors away. Residents had complained about drug dealing, and there was a recent shooting nearby. The police had made 3 arrests in the neighborhood before the events that led to Mr. Walker's death. The undercover detective never revealed himself as a police officer to Mr. Walker before drawing his gun and firing 3 shots, killing Mr. Walker on the sidewalk in front of his mother's home. While the city eventually reached a $2.25 million settlement for the benefit of his family, the detective who killed him was never criminally charged. The civil suit for damages was one based on negligence for wrongful death. The negligence, as stated in the complaint filed in court, consisted of the following: improperly and carelessly initiating a confrontation with Shem Walker, which was without probable cause and unwarranted under all the circumstances, in violation of restrictions and commonly accepted practices of the New York City Police Department. In improperly engaging in the use and discharge of a firearm, in shooting numerous shots and striking Shem Walker numerous times, and improperly, carelessly, and recklessly using physical force in connection with the unwarranted confrontation with Shem Walker, in violating the restrictions and commonly accepted practices of the New York City Police Department. And it is alleged the incident was further caused by the systematic failures of the protocols utilized in similar situations by the detective in failing to create and enforce guidelines and rules of the New York City Police Department governing the conduct of officers while utilizing their firearms. And while we understand monetary damages can give a family some closure, no amount of money can make up for the loss of an innocent life that was taken at the hands of a New York City Police Department undercover detective. The community will never forget Shem Walker for his service, nor will they forget the negligent actions of the detectives who robbed the Brooklyn community of one of its beloved citizens. I would now like to take a moment to ask for the production of a photograph I have provided the Commission, which was taken at a rally at which I was speaking not long after the killing of Shem Walker. Can we produce the photograph, please? Can we produce the photograph, please? Well, since we can't produce it, I'm going to hold up what I wanted to have produced and explain to you what it contains. You see in the photograph me speaking at the podium. Oh, there it is. Okay, so you see me speaking at the podium. To my left is then City Councilwoman Tish James, now the Attorney General of New York State. To my right is then City Councilman Bill de Blasio, now Mayor of the City of New York. Next to him, you see Hakeem Jeffries, a former New York State Assemblyman at the time, now a United States Congressman in a position of leadership in the House of Representatives. Behind Congressman Jeffries, you see Kirsten Foy, civil rights activist at the time, Reverend Kirsten Foy, a civil rights activist at the time. And behind Foy is civil rights leader Reverend Kevin McCall. Both McCall and Foy were young activists when this picture was taken and are now seasoned civil rights activists in New York City. You cannot underestimate the importance of civil rights activists and elected officials becoming involved and advocating for victims and victims' families who were wrongfully killed by police. The police have their unions, and some of their leaders are extremely outspoken in their advocacy for police who caused the death of innocent victims. Victims and their families need civil rights activists and elected officials to give balance to the advocacy from police union leaders at what I call the trial before the trial in the court of public opinion. As this concludes my testimony, I would now like to introduce one of those who was in that photograph 11 years ago, Reverend Kevin McCall, pictured in the photograph, and for 12 years, and for years before that as well, been fighting for justice for the wrongful death of victims of police brutality. Today, a respected leader in civil rights as an activist in his own right in New York City, Reverend Kevin McCall.